And before this video begins, I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asban Team level patron, Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. So at the start of the year, you probably saw all the confusion and hilarity stemming from the disastrous Willy's Chocolate Experience event, which no, isn't a euphemism. This interactive, immersive adventure promised an imagination lab, encheering entertainment, and a paradise of sweet teats. Of course, it was a disaster of AI-generated nonsense and misadvertising, but it at least gave us the most chilling and sinister villain of all modern media.
What is that? It's the unknown!
Anyway, hearing about such a disastrous immersive event got me thinking about the good ones, namely Doctor Who's attempts at immersive experiences. Because, you know, my entire life revolves around one specific media franchise and I hate it. Doctor Who has had a few different immersive experiences over the years, but today I wanted to talk about Time Fracture, a really ambitious event that came and went in the span of roughly a year and has kind of been forgotten about ever since. So take a seat and get ready to explore Skaro, Shakespeare and Cybermen, because it's time to step into the Time Fracture. The term immersive theatre is quite a broad one, and it essentially dates back to as far as ancient Rome and ancient Greece. Immersive theatre usually allows the audience to interact with the actors and surroundings of the performance. There's a few different types of immersive theatre, like bespoke theatres and choose your own adventure theatre. Hell, you could even argue the Christmas British pastime of pantomimes also count due to their audience participation. Oh yes it does. Oh no it doesn't.
It's not a pantomime!
However, the most notable and modern form of immersive theatre was popularised by the company Punch Drunk, founded in 2000. These performances often take place within specific sites that are tailor-made to be as immersive as possible, with the audience encouraged to pursue branching paths or simply explore the performance site as if it's an art installation. Time Fracture, created by Immersive Everywhere, was Doctor Who's take on such an experience, although it wasn't the first. During the operation of the Doctor experience in Cardiff Bay, visitors could take place in a semi-interactive experience created by Sana International, where they would be led through set-piece rooms by a performer serving as a guide. There were two different versions of this kind of interactive story, one with the 11th Doctor and one with the 12th, both featuring pre-recorded clips and monster props, along with putting you in familiar locations and allowing you to fly the TARDIS. They were great short experiences, but Time Fracture took it to a whole other level by heavily leaning into the immersive theatre genre and creating an almost 3-hour experience. Starting in 2020 and finishing in 2021, Time Lord Victorious was a multi-platform Doctor Who story telling one big narrative across audio dramas, books, comics and other pieces of media, including immersive experiences like the Dalek Escape Room and Time Fracture. For obvious reasons, almost all of these pieces of media are pretty standalone, but they do cross over, and Time Fracture was very much the same, with certain characters like Brian, the Ood assassin, appearing in the narrative. As I mentioned earlier, Time Fracture was created and produced by Immersive Everywhere, a very talented and prestigious live events company that had previously created the immersive Great Gatsby experience, placing you within the heat of the action as a guest of one of Gatsby's parties. Attendees would be encouraged to have some drinks, partake in dancing, and chat to the actors as this narrative unfolded around them. As the marketing went, if someone wants to show you something or take you somewhere, promise me you'll always say yes. With inventive, audience-focused events like this becoming smash hits, it was a no-brainer to make one for Doctor Who, since it's a media property with almost infinite potential, with lots of iconic characters, creatures, and worlds to immerse you in. So, in late 2019, it was announced that Doctor Who Time Fracture would be launched in late 2020, challenging fans to be the hero and save the planet. It was promised as a statement of intent by Immersive Everywhere, and then COVID happened. Yeah, just a couple of months after it was announced, the whole world shut down due to the incredibly quick spread of a global pandemic, with lockdowns in many places keeping people within their homes for their own safety and therefore cancelling any kinds of public events like concerts, sports, and even immersive sci-fi theatre experiences. However, this first lockdown was lifted in June, with some caveats. So on the 18th of August 2020, just 4 days after the reopening of indoor theatres, Time Fracture was once again announced. This time with official posters, details, and a planned start date of February 2021. A synopsis was released, reading, 1940, it's the height of the Blitz, a weapon of unknown origin destroys a small corner of Mayfair, and simultaneously opens up a rift in time and space. For decades, UNIT has fought to protect the people of Earth from the dangers it poses, but they've been beaten back as the fracture multiplies out of control. Earth as we know it is at stake. Now is the time for you to step up and be the hero. Travelling to impossible places, confronting menacing monsters and ancient aliens along the way, it's a journey across space and time to save our race and our beautiful planet. You know, that sounds great. Sign me up. Wait, what's that? COVID-2 Electric Boogaloo? Yeah, soon after the big unveiling of Time Fracture, COVID struck back, with more lockdowns pushing the opening date further and further back until its premiere performance finally happened on 26th of May 2021, only for London to then be hit with intense rainfall in July, leading to a damaged storm drain in the venue, flooding it and causing significant damage, leading to it being closed for almost the whole of July. And then it happened again. Genuinely, I kid you not. Whilst it was already shut down to repair flood damage, the venue got hit by a second flood, knocking it out until November 25th, 2021.
If I had a nickel for every time I was doomed by a puppet, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Meaning Time Fracture was out of action for nearly the entire second half of 2021. It was like the gods themselves wanted to destroy this project. First, a worldwide pandemic unseen in almost 100 years. Then constant apocalyptic flooding as if Poseidon himself was trying to drown it alive. But finally, after all that chaos and development hell, Time Fracture was actually ready to be experienced for a significant 6-month unbroken run. But what actually was it? The main core story of Time Fracture is the titular Time Fracture introduced in the UNIT field logs released in the lead up to the event. These minisodes established a narrative of a rift in time and space opening in Mayfair, London, with UNIT trying to protect the public from the fracture and explore it themselves to work out what exactly it is and how it works. Due to the experience tying into the Time Lord Victorious, this fracture was supposedly created when the 10th Doctor changed Adelaide Brooke's fixed death. When a temporal disruptor weapon caused an explosion in 1942, the fracture was opened up and connected to times and places like an alien market in 2156, the space cruiser liner ZZ-1, and the court of Queen Elizabeth in 1590. Over time, this fracture got worse and started to threaten all of reality, so the Doctor provides a list of names to UNIT, with Kate contacting those individuals, aka the guests, and informing them of their mission to travel to the UNIT Black site at Mayfair and enter the Time Fracture to close it for good. This was essentially the in-universe justification for all these random civilizations showing up for the Time Fracture experience, making guests feel handpicked by the heroic Doctor. And that's the backstory of Time Fracture, turning you as the audience into a temporary UNIT operative tasked with saving all of time and space, or getting killed by Daleks if you're not good enough, which obviously doesn't happen in the experience. So the actual experience of Time Fracture is kind of hard to sum up. It has many branching paths within the first half of the storyline. So I'll start with the path I myself followed when we went to the experience. As guests are taken into the UNIT Black site and briefed, Dr. Shaw takes them into the Black Archive, where Shaw explains their theory about the Time Disruptor, although the Black site is then attacked by Daleks. The 1st and 13th Doctors show up on a screen to repel them and send the guests through the fracture so they can find the different pieces of the Time Disruptor that that caused it in the first place. And this is where the paths branch significantly, with either a left or right path. We went left, which took us into this big alien marketplace before we were ushered into a tent with a member of the Sisterhood of Khan. There were only about 4 of us there, the 3 of us as friends and one really nice random girl that just got thrown into our group because she was on her own. So it actually felt really personal, and we even got to have a little bit of in-universe banter with the Sisterhood of Khan woman. She was great and we had a great laugh. Anyway, this Sisterhood of Khan lady told us a code word we had to take to someone who was implied to be the Doctor, because they had all these different actors throughout wearing doctorish clothes and acting vaguely like the Doctor. He ended up giving us some Dalek time controller MacGuffin thing and took us into a back room which was just straight up Skaro, complete with Davros, who was absolutely terrifying to see up close in person, and it felt so immersive. And that really was the most fun part about Time Fracture and what it achieved, being able to have all these great interactions with monsters and familiar characters. It felt so personal, especially when we were in such a small group compared to some of the other paths. One of my favourite moments was when we met Robert Dudley, the unit operative undercover in Queen Elizabeth I's court, and he gave us cover stories by pretending we were dukes of whichever counties we said we were from. It's just those little touches that made Time Fracture so fun to experience, because they really built up an immersive atmosphere that made you genuinely, actually unironically feel like you were part of an adventure and not just a guest or a spectator. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 major branching paths right at the very beginning, but even after that there are a lot of different ways you can go, meaning Time Fracture was pretty replayable, so to speak. There was a branch that had you meeting the Kablam Man, a clown guy or a pig man who actually jump scared us as we were walking in, which was, that was good. There were also ones where you met Torchwood, Shakespeare, River Song or Da Vinci. And other paths had you encountering Brian the Ood and the original character Zoria. So there were so many different paths you could take without ever really knowing you had changed your path, because it was all so seamless. However, the end of Act 1 brings pretty much everyone together in the court of Queen Elizabeth, with a wedding and a Shakespeare play, where the Cybermen invade and Zoria kills Robert Dudley to take the coronet of Rassilon. Yeah, this was actually pretty sad, because like I mentioned, we had met Robert Dudley when we were going through it, so we kind of felt a bit of a connection to him on a character level, because we were like, oh no, he's our friend, and now he's dead. So it was a really great way of getting you invested in characters. But yeah, after this point, everyone became one big group and followed the same path, which takes you to the intermission aboard the spaceship ZZ-1, specifically the Zagat Zagu Bar from The End of Time Part 2, which is basically just a short interval break where you can order drinks and chill for a bit. It was a nice breather, although obviously we didn't get anything to drink because London prices are a joke. We had a Silurian bar singer who performed an absolutely incredible rendition of Creep by Radiohead. Seriously, that was absolutely amazing. I have no idea who that was, but she was incredible. The ZZ-1 set design was fantastic, and it kind of made me wish there was just a Doctor Who themed bar out there, kind of like Ogre's Cantina at Galaxy's Edge. I did get told off by a 13th Doctor-esque actor for sitting on a stool, and I thought she was actually telling me off because she seemed really annoyed, but she was just messing around because there was a keep tentacle off seats sign, which I thought was an actual no sitting sign that was just keeping up the roleplay. But yeah, I kind of feel bad for her because she probably felt really bad after it, seeing how, worried I got and I was standing up for the next 10 minutes. Anyway, the intermission ended with Zoria hijacking the ship, stealing a piece of the time disruptor and killing Brian the Ood, taking the ship to Gallifrey. Brian the Ood is meant to be a big reveal that he dies. You see him in a bathroom and you're like, oh my god, not Brian the Ood. But we didn't run into him the whole time, so it didn't really mean anything to us. It's like the Robert Dudley thing, where if you were part of his group at the start, it's kind of an upsetting moment because your character's now dead. The different incarnations of the Doctor then collect everyone in slightly larger groups, and they took us through the basement from Rose, which was now full of weeping angels, and you basically had to run through in pitch black darkness, which was chaotic and probably a little bit dangerous, honestly. We then went through the Kasavin realm and the Castle from Heaven Sent before ending up in the Undergallery, where another version of the Doctor told us some techno-babble about the time disruptor, and then every group ends up on Gallifrey, where the High Council debates on what to use the time disruptor for, with Romana then showing up and kicking Zoria out of the Pridorian chapter. This final sequence on Gallifrey was essentially like watching a stage play, and it was just fine. It was mainly boring Time Lord politics, which, yeah, can just get so dull sometimes. Although in the only audience involvement segment in that final sequence, they got a group of people from each big group who had collected the important MacGuffins throughout, and, my friend Yasmin was up there and she didn't know how to place the thing into the table properly, and it was kind of awkward, so I felt bad for her there. Because, you're doing this in a room in front of everyone. It's a giant circle, so everyone was watching the people at the table, so yeah, kind of felt bad for her there. Anyway, Rassilon then gets resurrected as he's wont to do, and tries to carry out the ultimate sanction, only for the Daleks to show up because of Davros earlier on, somehow getting to Gallifrey and sending the Daleks. It's all a bit confusing. The High Council and Rassilon are then killed, but the Daleks are stopped, and all the Doctors show up on screens around the room to close the time fracture and save the universe, with the story ending in the original room where it all began, and UNIT are thanking you, but they don't know why because, it's all been erased. I do think it was a bit of a disappointing and weak ending after such a great first half, but it was still a lot of fun and kept the general atmosphere going really well. It was cool that afterwards you could take photos from the main unit area and the Black Archive room, which had a lot of props and Easter eggs, so that was a nice way of leaving things off. When it comes to being immersive, Time Fracture was absolutely perfect, with such a fantastic atmosphere and a lot of attention to detail. The acting was great, and it all blended together to genuinely make you feel as though you were in the middle of a Doctor Who adventure, and I think the fans appreciated that a lot, since it was received pretty well and got some great reviews. I was even planning on going again for a second or third visit before it ended, because I wanted to experience some of those other paths and step foot in some of those other sets within the complex. Time Fracture was meant to close in September 2022, but in May it suddenly announced it would be closing in early June, so it was too late to go again, and that's a real shame. It was plagued by so many issues, and right as it was hitting its stride, it got suddenly cut short, and to this day we still don't really know why. The worst impacts of COVID on the live action entertainment industry were already subsiding by this point, but it could have been down to a lack of interest due to poor marketing and a general lack of cultural interest in Doctor Who at the time. In the months leading up to its early closure, tickets were being sold for as low as £10 according to some sources, which always suggests a desperation to make some sales. If they weren't selling enough tickets to offset the operating costs, it makes a lot of sense that they would choose to just end it early to save some money. However, even 2 years later, the future of Time Fracture remains uncertain. Towards the end of its run, it started promoting the final performances as the last London missions, suggesting a change of location much like the Worlds of Wonder exhibition, which has gone from Liverpool to Scotland to New Zealand. Bit of a jump there. Nothing has been said or even hinted towards in regards to this potential approach, so it's unlikely to happen. When I was researching this video, I actually stumbled upon a promotional video on the Immersive Everywhere website that claims Time Fracture is returning in 2024. As far as I can tell, this video was added to the site no earlier than September 2023, so it could still be on the cards. Maybe a retooled experience for the new era, but given we're halfway through 2024 with no news, it does seem unlikely that Time Fracture will return this year, if it ever even does. When you're a Doctor Who fan, the ultimate experience is to feel like you're in an episode or an adventure of your very own, living and breathing within the world of the show, much like a theme park or similar attraction. Immersive experiences are fantastic ways to achieve this dream, allowing you to directly interact with so many iconic characters, monsters, and settings within the Doctor Who universe, with Time Fracture having gorgeous attention to detail with its set design and prosthetics. Of course, it wasn't perfect, with some lack of direction at points and a bit of chaos with so many groups to manage. When we went, we faced some confusion between the content and Skaro because we were just kind of parked by the Doctor actor we were meant to meet, and it seemed like he forgot about us for a minute as he probably went off to deal with another group, so we kind of just stood around not sure what we were meant to do. But it's not exactly easy to manage so many small groups like there were. Time Fracture was essentially cursed from the very beginning, with all of its flooding, COVID shutdowns, and even having to replace capsules Captain Jack's pre-recorded segment last minute because of the John Barrowman controversy. However, Time Fracture was an incredible immersive experience that excelled as a template for how the format can be refined and perfected if they were to pursue it again going forward. From the Unit Black site to Gallifrey and the spaceship bar in between, Time Fracture threw you deep into the Doctor Who narrative experience. The interactivity made it feel very personal and like you had a real impact on the story as it unfolded. And it had enough branches and variation to make it an experience you could revisit time and time again, since every visit would be different. But the event was very much a victim of circumstance. All those production issues, weak marketing, and a general disinterest in Doctor Who at the time combined to work against Time Fracture, to the extent it is kind of being forgotten about and nobody really talks about it anymore, especially because a lot of it is visually undocumented due to the rules around taking photos and videos, so there's no record of how a lot of it actually played out apart from people who went there remembering what happened. It's a real shame because it had such a talented cast and crew and created one of the best Doctor Who fan experiences of all time, the kind of immersive quest you dream about as a kid. We don't know the future of Time Fracture, and I can't speculate on its potential return or what legacy it might end up having, but it deserves a lot more appreciation for what it managed to achieve whilst it was here, and hopefully it gets a second chance to shine now that Doctor Who seems to be back on the upswing. And with the Disney Plus distribution deal, if things go well, maybe it could even show up in Disneyland or Disney World. I mean, it's a long shot, but it would be perfect for a place like that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez, my Diamond level patron Glenna Clark, my Platinum level patrons Matthew Burns and Maximilian Foreman, and all my Gold level patrons Chris Douglas, Daniel Shillito, the 3 Railway Engines, and Thomas R. Thank you so much for your support.